There is an amazing interview with MSNBC's Rachel Maddow, of course, openly lesbian, and Attorney General Loretta Lynch, who has been a staunch proponent of LGBT activism and a great friend of the gay and lesbian community. It's conducted at the famous or infamous Stonewall Inn, depending on your perspective. This is where there were riots against the police in 1969 and what was the real public bursting forth of the gay liberation movement, the gay revolution. And they're talking about the significance of what took place there, and now a major shift where the outgoing Attorney General will be Loretta Lynch, and the incoming Attorney General, if approved, and we assume he will be Jeff Sessions. And you're talking about a night and day contrast in terms of perspective, in terms of what they feel is important in morality and societal values. Great contrast between them. And Rachel Maddow and Loretta Lynch are wondering what's coming next. Is there some type of a cultural backlash against gay activism and things like that? What can we expect under the Trump administration? It's a fascinating, eye-opening interview in terms of what they say, what their perspective is. And remember, President Obama memorialized Stonewall by talking about going from Seneca to Selma to Stonewall. Seneca meaning women's rights in the 1800s, Selma black rights, civil rights in the 1960s, and now Stonewall, late 1960s, the gay revolution. Listen to what Loretta Lynch has to say about this uprising that was a violent revolt against the police.
I mean, this is a site of police violence. This is a site that we commemorate because of the riot that happened here. How does that square for you from law enforcement perspective?
You know, what this site means to me is this is a site of not just an uprising, but a night when ordinary people decided that they were entitled to live their life fully and openly as Americans. And they publicly stated that. And they faced a great deal of resistance, as every group who has made that statement has throughout the history of our country. And they did not give up, and they started a movement. So I think also the opposition of the forces of law enforcement at that time not supporting that right for people to express themselves and be who they are and simply live their lives is emblematic of a lot of things that we're still struggling with in this country. We've come a long way in all of these various movements, but these tensions are still here. I've spent a great deal of my tenure dealing with the tensions between law enforcement and the communities that we serve. And so when you look back at a movement like Stonewall and the fact that it did start as an uprising in opposition to the police or the expression of the government, that they weren't supporting these individuals, I think it's very symbolic, I think it's very poignant, and frankly, I think it's very, very educational and inspirational.
Now, here's what's so remarkable about what Attorney General Lynch has to say. She's talking about a violent uprising. I mean, police were barricaded in at a certain point, projectiles being thrown at them, fire started, and then it ended up being thousands of people involved on the streets. And this was a riot. This was lawless. And what triggered it, as I understand it, what I've read from gay historians and others talking about it, was that the bar was mafia-owned. There would be periodic raids by the police, and then you might have a transvestite prostitute or something like that who'd be arrested overnight and then back out the next day. And at a certain point, they said enough is enough, and they violently fought back. Listen, their lives were not being physically threatened by the police. There is no legitimate reason for them to violently oppose the police. There was no legitimate reason. If there is an aggrieved group today, you do not take out your grievances with violent attacks on the police and doing damage to buildings and cars and things like that. You don't do that. But Loretta Lynch is so committed to the cause of gay activism that trumps law and order. We're not talking about the police violently attacking people and people fighting back for their lives. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people who said, gays and lesbians, transvestites at that time, who said enough is enough. And they decided to fight back physically, and the police became the enemy. This was lawlessness. This was rebellion. This was disorder. This was wrong. This was an unrighteous riot. And that, in many ways, is what publicly burst forth the gay liberation movement on America. And that's why so many rallies are held in June when this took place, June of '69. A lot of gay pride parades and rallies are held in June, and movements are named after Stonewall. This was rebellion. This was something that should be infamous more than famous. Yes, do we care about every American? Yes. Is the president of every American? Yes. Should every American have justice under the law? Yes, of course. But that has nothing to do with a violent revolt against police, because they said we've had it with these raids. In point of fact, it is always wrong when we take the law in our own hands and get violent against those who are there to keep the peace. The fact that this cannot be justified and even pointed to as a paradigm for today, you want to say that as the Attorney General? God forbid. I'm hoping that Senator Jeff Sessions, as Attorney General, will do a whole lot better than Miss Loretta Lynch.